Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Wisconsin-born, Kansas City-based jazz drummer Evan Verploegh. We talked to him in early March 2021 about quite a bit. He is new to Kansas City. He arrived in October of 2019. Just as he was getting his feet settled, COVID happened and got in the way of him really taking off in this jazz town. He opened up about how he got into jazz in the beginning, his move to Kansas City, and his hopes for the post-COVID future, along with a little bit more. Get to know him and enjoy.
Thanks for taking a minute out.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Thanks for reaching out. It means a lot to me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about, before we kind of get into your career and being in Kansas City and all of that, give me an idea of how everything has been going for you during the pandemic. I mean, it's obviously affected quite a bit, Kansas City. We've seen that happen. So how have you been doing during the pandemic?
Gosh, I would be lying if I said I was doing great. I don't think that would be, a surprise to anybody. I think musicians out there have been, as you know, hit horribly by the pandemic, and I consider myself lucky that I am employed outside of music and have that income coming in, but I know there are so many full-time musicians here in Kansas City who don't necessarily have that luxury, and I just my heart goes out to everybody else out there. I hesitate to do too much complaining. I truly consider myself lucky. However, inspiration, I think, has proved to become somewhat difficult. It kind of comes and goes. In the way of my feelings in regards to the pandemic. I'm fairly new to Kansas City. I just moved in October, so I had about 3 or 4 months of being new to the music community, meeting musicians, starting to play some gigs here in the city before, of course, March came around and put that to a halt. Coming from Wisconsin and being really excited about being in Kansas City, a wonderful jazz city, a city that I was, now very proud to call my home. It was fairly devastating, and it took probably a month, maybe more, before I had that much interest in sitting down at my instrument, which primarily is the drum set. And since then, fortunately, I have continued to garner new perspective on what it means to be a musician, why I love making music, and what it does for both myself and everybody out there. Maybe the last 6 months or so, I found myself kind of re-energized and been able to work through some projects that I've been looking to do kind of as a solo musician, which is something I hadn't really had much experience doing before the pandemic. So, like everybody, extremely anxious and enthused for things to return back to normalcy when it's safe to do so. But I have finally found a rhythm that I think is going to work for me, at least for the rest of the pandemic.
So are you relieved that you actually moved prior to the pandemic? I mean, would it have happened possibly if you didn't do it when you did it?
Yeah, I consider myself lucky to probably have made that move. My partner and I moved from northern Wisconsin, rural northern Wisconsin, in fact, where we had a wonderful life there, albeit a much slower pace, and we're certainly creatively fulfilled. But I think we're looking for kind of the next step in our journey. And to have made the move when we did is a little bit unfortunate because we haven't really experienced Kansas City proper, with it really in full swing. But I do consider ourselves lucky to have made the move prior to the pandemic. Absolutely, it would have made it extremely challenging to have moved during it. So yes, I do. I'm fortunate in that regard.
So what brought you to Kansas City?
Well, primarily, my partner is a producer at KCUR, so her new job brought her down here. We were both looking for a place where I think we could engage. I suppose I hesitate to use the word deeper because we really had a fruitful artistic and creative community in Wisconsin. But I think we were just looking for just a larger community, one that had a wonderful art scene as Kansas City does, and just additional opportunities. We had visited Kansas City several years prior, and quickly, kind of fell in love with it. We were able to go out to Green Lady, see some live music, and it was kind of like an immediate, like, wow, Kansas City is an incredibly vibrant place in a lot of regards, whether it's music, food, what have you. So her job was the primary catalyst, but I think we were both excited about the new opportunities that Kansas City were to bring.
So let's go back to the beginnings of your life. How did the seeds of jazz, so to speak, begin for you and get to where you're at now?
Sure. Well, I had a very long and winding path that eventually has landed at jazz and improvised music more broadly. As many Midwestern raised people, rock music was incredibly important and still is to me on many levels. Growing up, listening to my dad's CDs, riding in the back of the car, whether it was the Stones, whether it was Bob Dylan, whether it was Bruce Springsteen, all of that music was a part of me and my core very early on. And I like to tell this story, but very much a catalyst for my interest in really understanding how music moved me on a sort of primal level was my dad taking me to see the Stones my first day of sixth grade on their Bigger Bang tour, and that was huge for me. And coming out and hearing the way that Charlie Watts's drums sounded in this cavernous arena, and just the vibrations that I felt, it went far beyond things on an emotional level. I was truly, it was sensory overload for me, and from that moment on, things shifted. It did. It scrambled my brain, I think, in the best possible way. Prior to that, I had taken piano lessons. I ended up taking piano, I suppose, from about the time I was 6 years old until 10 years old. So I developed an early appreciation for music, for that particular instrument, the piano, which I still love to play today. But learning how to read music at an early age, which I fortunately has stuck with me, albeit I'm a fairly slow reader, but still having that roots in piano in a melodic instrument and percussive instrument for that matter was extremely important to me. So I began playing the drums in sixth grade, and it was very much sort of a happenstance kind of situation. I had a couple acquaintances who mentioned that they were looking to do something for the school, the talent show. We were looking to play, I think, Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne, and I like, we need a drummer though. We need a drummer, and I was like, well, I don't play the drums, but I certainly am moved and inspired by the drums. So it was very much learning on the job, having never played the instrument. I think, and it was a month of borrowing my friend's drum set and trying to learn just how to play a very ultimately fairly basic rock tune. So growing from that, it turned into having a working band in high school with my two good friends. It kind of ran the gamut of various rock genres, and then which we still look back as such like a fruitful time in our lives to be gigging. When we're 16, 17 years old around our town, Wausau, Wisconsin, and doing a bit of traveling to gigs around the state. I mean, all that was very rewarding, and I still look back very fondly at those times, and to have that gigging experience at a young age. But then to expedite things a little bit, once I got into college, and as so many people do, we get exposed to different types of music. It was very much the influence of a group of people that I fell into, exposing me to the music of Phish and the Grateful Dead, and this sort of improvisational music where it was a melting pot of these various influences, but ultimately the core of that music was rooted in improvisation, and this theme of improvisation became such an important part of my musical identity. So growing from that, from seeing Phish, countless times, and the way that they shifted their set list every night, you didn't know what you were going to expect. Different songs, extended bits of improvisation that went far beyond just vamping on a couple chords. I mean, the way that they created sort of a cinematic landscape with their music is something that I still point to as extremely influential for me. So from there, it got into kind of the next step was like listening to 70s Period Miles, hearing like Bitches Brew for the first time, combined like all these new elements that I was exploring kind of into this perfect synthesis where it was rock, funk, jazz, but very much improvisational music. And from there, it's been kind of a continual exploration, both to music before that, whether it be hard bop versus music that I'm most probably inspired by now, which is free jazz, free improvisational music, but ultimately what I consider equal parts, I consider myself a musician, I consider myself an improviser, and whether that is jazz improvisation, whether that is free improvisation that is kind of influenced from contemporary classical music or the like, improvisation is endlessly inspiring topic that I look forward to exploring the rest of my life.
So as we get to this point where things are obviously opening up, I mean, here in Kansas City, the Royals will be playing with fans. We're hearing things and gigs and stuff is starting to kind of happen. There's a level of awakening and revival that's beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What's on your docket as far as maybe musical projects, live gigs, anything that will be a part of getting back to it?
Growing my friendship community here in Kansas City of musicians, I've met just wonderful musicians thus far. Going to the jams at the Blue Room, at the Phoenix, Stephen Martin's jam that he was putting on for a while there. I started to develop this wonderful community, and I'm looking to continue to grow that and really just ultimately play and as many gigs as I can, and ultimately build strong connections with my fellow musicians here in Kansas City. I'm of the ilk that bonds, musical bonds that can continue to get deeper through regular playing with each other is the most special way that I've found to connect with music. So I'm looking to continue to kind of harbor these relationships and also just continue to improve as a musician. I'm fairly new to this a community where jazz is such a deep-rooted part of Kansas City. That culture is not something that I've necessarily been a part of before. So, for initially going to these jams and such was somewhat of a nerve-wracking experience for me, and it took a long time to feel relaxed and feel like I could truly be expressive on my instrument. And so just continuing to gain experience, and when the time comes that more gigs are becoming available, I sure hope to be a part of them, because live music, as for so many jazz musicians, is the ultimate expression, performing in front of an audience, being vulnerable and being sincere with your music in front of people who are intently listening is the ultimate sort of vision, and I can't wait to get back to that.
You represent an idea that's come to fruition, that's real, is that a lot of people are coming to Kansas City as a destination, and I don't know that happened a whole lot for a while here. And do you ever think about that being a part of a group like Adam Larson came here from New York? There's a lot of people that have decided to come to Kansas City. Have you thought about being a part of that group and what that means, and talked to them and kind of cultivated some wisdom from people that have done the same?
Yes, I have, whether it's Adam Larson, whether it's, Logan Richardson moving back, Ryan Lee. I mean, there's all these extraordinarily high level musicians who have either in the past called Kansas City their home and have since returned, or are really coming to Kansas City for the first time. And it's so validating, I feel, to even talk with myself on the level of those musicians are. I don't know that I can honestly do, because they are truly some of the highest level musicians in the country, and I feel like I'm still very much on a process towards jazz music is a lifelong process, but I still feel somewhat as I'm playing catch up here a little bit. But to have these musicians that are returning to Kansas City and really, I think, passionate about continuing to grow a youthful and vibrant scene here in Kansas City is so exciting. And just in some of the brief conversations that I've had with these musicians, the fondness that they speak of the Kansas City jazz community, and also the things that they feel that can be changed about it, whether it's more opportunities for original music to be presented, more venues that can bring in maybe different types of folks outside of quote unquote the stereotypical jazz fan, continuing these melding of modern genres towards very creative and very honest music. They are inspired to create that here in Kansas City and continue to build that, and it's an honor, I guess, to be a part of that. And I'm so excited to continue to grow here and develop as a musician. And I couldn't imagine truly a better place to do it. We look at these great jazz cities, whether it be New York, whether it be LA, whether it be Chicago, and these are always going to be true meccas and will feature some of the highest level musicians. But I found that the opportunities to get gigs, to just get out and play here in Kansas City are next to none. And why that has been lost here over the last year, I think I have a feeling it's going to come back as strong as ever.
Yeah, I hope so, for sure. What are you looking forward to do the most here in town? I mean, you said you've tasted it a little bit, and obviously coming here in October of 2019, things happen very fast. What are you really looking forward to getting immersed in this town?
Ultimately, what I'm most looking forward to is I would really like to develop a regular playing band that does some travel, but ultimately grows here from its Kansas City roots. I would always like to be thought of as someone who could be called for various gigs, jazz or otherwise, around town as a lone performer. But coming kind of, I think, from the rock ethos of very much developing a working band and developing a sound, an aesthetic, that is an inspiring notion to me. So I'm looking as a musician to develop that band that a band like the Bad Plus, for instance, I always point to as just this wonderful example of three incredibly unique identities who have come together and present themselves as a collective group of musicians. I think that if there's any criticism I have for jazz, it's often these kind of soul presentations or the lead and sideman type tradition, and that's not necessarily something that I look to as necessarily the way I'm looking to spend my musical life. That is, of course, never to take away from the long history of jazz being presented in that, but the way that bands like the Bad Plus and others have presented themselves is something that I look to as what I want to be a part of. And if I can continue to develop relationships and hopefully put together a band that kind of holds on to these ideologies of growing as a collective group, that's really what I'm looking for most here in Kansas City.
So as things wake up and joints start opening back up and we get back to live music post-COVID, what are you hoping we all realize collectively, musician and audience, about this long time away from live music?
Speaking for myself, all I can say is that every opportunity to play music, whether it's by yourself, whether it's with one other person, whether it's in a big band situation, whether it's in front of people or not, every opportunity is a gift. It's not to be taken for granted, and I think it's easy to do so. This sort of notion that it's always going to be there is not necessarily the case. Yes, music, sitting down with your instrument will always be a part of one's life and the ability to do that, but going out and presenting your music in front of people is it's a true gift. And anybody, whether it's one person in the audience or 1,000 people in the audience, if one person is deeply listening and being moved emotionally by your music, then I mean that to me is ultimate expression that is the creative goal. And I know for myself that when I get back to gigging, I'm gonna have to take a pause at each moment in each gig and soak in just this wonderful opportunity that any performing musicians have. It's just a wonderful gift. And speaking with other musicians, I think a lot of us have realized that. And so I think that when things really start ramping up again, I truly believe that there's going to be a newfound emotional and creative connection to this beautiful music, jazz music, any type of music. And while I don't think anybody is happy this pandemic happened, I think it's going to ultimately have created some remarkable music, and I think we'll see some highly emotional performances when we're back to it.
I agree. So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Well, I suppose that changes day to day. There are feelings, times when I feel confident in myself, in my musical abilities, and there's other times when I feel like I am just a beginner, and I think the latter is ultimately tends to be a better place to be. So the best way I could possibly describe myself, I suppose, without being too self-centered about it, would just be an explorer. Whether it's exploring through travel, whether it's exploring through improvisational music, whether it's exploring kind of my own thoughts and developing an identity, this notion of constant exploration and not necessarily knowing what is coming next and being okay with that idea is something that I think I have realized here in the last year, especially. I think it's easy to sit and kind of try to classify who you are as a person. For me, it's become so much more rewarding to just accept the unknown and accept that I don't really know much here as a 27-year-old on this earth, and that's okay, because I'm going to continue to gain more experiences and explore the world, explore music, explore relationships with other people, and that notion of the unknown is very exciting. and I'm excited to keep working through this life, not knowing what is coming next, but trying to be present and trying to be sincere with how I respond to the moment.
Right on, Evan. Hey, thanks, man. It's great to catch up with you. I'm looking forward to getting you out in front of the Neon Jazz audience and hopefully meet you once the world wakes up and we get to see live music again.
Hey, well, thank you so much, Joe. I really enjoyed this, and I appreciate you reaching out.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Wisconsin, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Evan for his time, music, and story. And we want to welcome him to Kansas City. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.